What if the cartoons you grew up with were never meant to survive the future? The 1980s were wild, creative, and completely unchecked. Networks took risks. Creators slipped in ideas no one stopped to question, and kids absorbed it all before anyone hit the brakes. Some of those shows vanished quietly. Others were buried on purpose. Halfway through this list, you'll start to understand why a few of them are never coming back. Number 20. The Pirates of Dark Water, 1991. This cartoon looked like a fantasy adventure, but it carried real weight. The world of the Pirates of Dark Water was falling apart. Oceans were poisoned. Kingdoms weakened. Hope never felt secure. The story followed a young prince trying to restore balance, yet the show rejected easy optimism. Every episode reinforced the same idea. Damage lasts, corruption spreads. Fixing what's broken takes more than courage. What makes it uncomfortable today is how little it softened that message. Victories were partial. Progress moved slowly and often reversed. The tone asked viewers to live with unease. The series also never completed its story. The world stayed fractured, the quest unfinished. That lack of closure feels intentional now. Number 19. C.O.P.S. 1988. C.O.P.S. presented a world built entirely on order. Teams were ranked, roles were fixed, authority moved in one direction and was never questioned. Heroes weren't defined by personality, they were defined by function. Identity followed assignment. Individual judgment mattered less than obedience. At the time, this structure felt reassuring. Clear rules, clear solutions, discipline solved everything. Today, it feels rigid. The show never explored alternative viewpoints. The system was always correct. Opposition existed only to be corrected. Modern audiences expect complexity. C.O.P.S. offered certainty instead. That certainty removes tension and choice. Without choice, stories feel hollow. The cartoon reflected an era that trusted systems completely. That trust has faded, which is why this show now feels frozen in its time. Number 18. Silverhawks, 1986. Silverhawks looked polished and futuristic. Shiny heroes, clean visuals. But beneath the surface was a strict moral framework. Justice was absolute. Authority was centralized. Consequences were permanent. There was no room for doubt. The heroes didn't question orders. They executed them. Individual emotion came second to duty. That clarity felt heroic in the 1980s. Today, it feels inflexible. Modern storytelling values internal conflict. Silverhawks avoided it. The show treated certainty as strength. That message now feels incomplete. It wasn't cruel, it was confident. And confidence without reflection feels outdated. Silverhawks didn't disappear because it was weak. It disappeared because its certainty left no room for discussion. Number 17. Robotech, 1985. Robotech changed expectations overnight. It introduced long storytelling, emotional continuity, and lasting consequences. Characters grew. Relationships evolved. Loss stayed with the audience. There was no reset, no easy comfort. For kids, that was intense. For modern networks, it's risky. The show trusted viewers to handle complexity. That trust is rare now. Robotech didn't rush emotion. It let moments breathe. Watching it today feels closer to adult drama than children's animation. That's why it stands apart, and why it's rarely replicated. Number 16. G.I. Joe, 1983. G.I. Joe was polished and confident. Teams worked in perfect coordination. Missions were clear. Authority was respected. The show presented organization as the solution to every problem. Structure equaled safety. Obedience equaled success. At the time, this felt inspiring. Today, it feels overly simplified. Modern audiences expect questioning. G.I. Joe avoided it. The stories rarely explored consequences beyond the immediate win. The system was always justified. That certainty no longer resonates. The show wasn't subtle, and subtlety matters now. G.I. Joe remains iconic, but its worldview belongs to a different era. Number 15. The Raccoons, 1985. At first glance, the Raccoons looks gentle, soft colors, friendly animals, a calm theme song that feels like a warm blanket. But sit with it for more than one episode, and the tone shifts. This was not a sugar-coated cartoon. It was a quiet warning disguised as comfort food. The show followed a group of forest animals constantly battling one recurring problem: greed. The main antagonist was not a monster or a villain in a mask. He was a smooth-talking businessman obsessed with profit, development, and control. Every story revolved around exploitation of land, manipulation of systems, and the slow destruction of community for personal gain. For a children's show, that was heavy. The writing trusted kids to understand patterns, who benefits, who loses, and why the damage keeps repeating. There were no easy fixes. Problems came back. Victories felt temporary. That honesty is exactly why it feels uncomfortable today. Modern networks prefer clear heroes and quick lessons. The Raccoons offered something riskier. It suggested the problem never really goes away. It just changes names. That quiet realism is why this show feels more adult now than it did back then, and that's exactly why it stays forgotten. Number 14, Dungeons & Dragons, 1983. This cartoon starts with a simple setup. A group of kids board a ride. The ride takes them somewhere else, and they never go home. That's not a metaphor. That's the entire series. Every episode of Dungeons & Dragons revolved around survival in a hostile fantasy world. The children were guided by a mysterious figure who offered advice but never solutions. They faced constant danger, impossible choices, and near escapes that always ended the same way. Still trapped, still waiting. What makes the show unsettling now is the emotional weight it carried without apology. Fear was real. Loss was implied. Hope was constantly dangled and taken away. There was no reset button, no comforting end message, and famously, no proper ending at all. The series trusted its audience to live with uncertainty. Modern animation avoids that. Today, stories reassure. This one unsettled. It let the silence linger. It allowed kids to sit with unresolved tension. That choice made it unforgettable, and also unrepeatable. A show about children permanently lost with no clear exit does not fit modern standards. But for those who saw it, the memory still sticks, because it never let you relax. Number 13, Pole Position, 1984. Pole Position looked like a racing cartoon. Bright cars, fast chases, cool gadgets, but that was camouflage. Underneath, this was a show about constant surveillance. The main characters were siblings working for a secret organization. Their lives were monitored, their missions assigned. Their technology tracked every move. Even their talking vehicle doubled as an overseer. Privacy did not exist. Independence was optional at best. In the 1980s, this felt futuristic and exciting. Today, it feels uncomfortably familiar. The idea of young people being guided, watched, and evaluated by unseen authorities hits differently now. The tone was serious. Consequences mattered. Mistakes were not always forgiven, and the show rarely paused to explain the morality of what was happening. It simply presented it as normal. That lack of reflection is why it would struggle today. Modern audiences expect commentary. Pole Position offered none. It assumed the system was correct. The mission always justified the pressure. It was stylish, it was tense, and it was way ahead of its time, which is exactly why it quietly disappeared once the future caught up. Number 12, Turbo Teen, 1984. Turbo Teen has one of the strangest ideas ever approved for a cartoon. A teenage boy turns into a sports car when exposed to heat. Not as a metaphor, not as a dream. Physically. The transformation scenes linger just long enough to feel uncomfortable. Limbs stretch, shapes shift. The show plays it for humor, but never explains the cost. Everyone treats it like a perk. Adults accept it instantly. Friends use it for convenience. The main character barely reacts at all. That lack of concern is what makes it unsettling now. The show never asks whether the change hurts, or whether it's a choice. It rushes past the implications in favor of jokes and chase scenes. In the 1980s, strange ideas were allowed to exist without explanation. Audiences didn't demand logic. Today, they do. And Turbo Teen has no answers. That's why it feels like a relic of unchecked creativity. Bold, absurd, and quietly uncomfortable. A concept that could only survive in a decade where nobody stopped to ask if it should. Number 11, Mr. T, 1983. This cartoon wasn't built around a story. It was built around fame. Mr. T played a version of himself guiding a group of kids through problems and lessons. At the time, it felt inspiring, a real-world icon showing the right path. Watching it now, the structure feels rigid. Every episode followed the same rhythm. A problem appears. Mr. T explains the lesson. The story closes. The kids rarely made choices on their own. Mr. T always had the answer, always the final word. That imbalance feels dated today when stories value teamwork and growth. The show also locked itself into its era. Simplified messages, broad assumptions, ideas that once felt clear now feel narrow. It meant well, but modern animation avoids direct instruction. That's why it faded. Not because it failed, but because it belongs to a moment that no longer exists. Number 10. The New Adventures of He-Man, 1990. This series didn't update a classic, it replaced it. The familiar world vanished, and He-Man was dropped into a cold future ruled by structure and control. The bright fantasy was gone. In its place were metal cities and distant commanders. He-Man no longer led. He followed instructions. Missions replaced quests. Joy gave way to duty. For longtime viewers, this felt jarring. The hero they knew suddenly felt smaller inside a larger system. Strength mattered less than obedience. Confidence turned into compliance. What feels uncomfortable now is the quiet message. Progress requires surrendering identity. Advancement means fitting into systems you don't control. The show never questions this. Modern animation empowers characters. This version reduced them. It wasn't a failure. It was a mismatch. And that's why it disappeared. Number 9. Bionic 6, 1987. Bionic 6 looked bright and exciting. A family of heroes with matching suits and abilities. But beneath the surface was a strict idea. Enhancement equals value. Every family member depended on upgrades to function as a hero. Without them, they were ordinary. The show treated this as progress and never questioned the pressure behind it. What happens when improvement becomes expectation, when worth is measured by modification? The series never slows down to ask. It celebrates advancement without reflection. The family structure also feels rigid. Authority flows downward. Decisions come from the top. Individual voices exist, but hierarchy always wins. In the late 1980s, this reflected optimism about technology. Today, it feels colder. The idea that value must be engineered doesn't land the same way. That's why it wouldn't air now. Number 8. Jace and the Wheeled Warriors, 1985. Jace and the Wheeled Warriors opens with urgency and never releases it. A young hero searches for answers in a world that never stabilizes. The threats aren't silly or temporary. They return again and again. What makes the show stand out is its refusal to resolve anything. Progress is fragile. Victories never last. Each step forward exposes a new problem. For kids, this created constant tension. For adults now, it feels exhausting on purpose. The show never promises safety. It never guarantees relief. The tone is serious. Loss lingers. Characters carry weight. The journey matters more than the destination because the destination never arrives. Modern animation demands payoff. Jace denied it. That honesty is why it feels out of place now, and why it's remembered so vividly. Number 7. The Smurfs, 1981. The Smurfs looked harmless. Bright colors, small characters, simple conflicts, but spend time there and patterns emerge. Everyone had a role. Everyone stayed in it. Individuality existed, but only within fixed limits. Leadership was unquestioned. Tradition ruled everything. At the time, this felt comforting, a predictable world with order. Today, it feels restrictive. Characters rarely changed. Personal growth was temporary at best. Smart stayed smart. Grumpy stayed grumpy. Identity was fixed. Modern audiences expect evolution. The Smurfs resisted it, not because it was cruel, but because it valued stability over curiosity. That rigidity is why it feels dated now. It worked in a simpler era. Today, it feels like a closed system. And closed systems don't age gracefully. Number 6. The Snorks, 1984. The Snorks took a familiar idea and polished it until nothing sharp remained. Underwater cities, bright colors, everything neat and organized. On the surface, it was cheerful. But beneath that cheer was pressure. Everyone fit in. Everyone complied. Standing out was allowed only within strict limits. The world rewarded sameness. Differences were softened. Conflict was reduced. Even problems felt carefully approved. Watching it now, the tone feels overly controlled, like a community that values harmony over honesty. Discomfort was avoided at all costs. Modern storytelling embraces friction. The Snorks rejected it. It wasn't offensive. It was restrictive. And that quiet restriction is why it feels wrong today. Number 5. Thundarr the Barbarian, 1980. Thundarr the Barbarian never aimed to comfort its audience. From the opening moments, it made the setting clear. This was a world after collapse. Cities were ruins. Nature had reclaimed what people lost. Survival was uncertain. Technology still existed, but it was unstable and dangerous. Power was uneven. Knowledge was rare. Authority was often harsh. Thundarr himself reflected that world. He wasn't polished or hopeful. He was shaped by loss and constant struggle. What makes the show difficult today is how little it softened these ideas. Victories felt small. Threats never disappeared. Progress was fragile. For a children's cartoon, that honesty was bold. Modern animation usually cushions harsh realities. Thundarr didn't. And that refusal to pretend is why it still feels powerful. Number 4. Robotech, 1985. Robotech quietly changed what animated storytelling could be. Instead of resetting each episode, it let events carry forward. Characters grew. Relationships changed. Loss stayed meaningful. When someone left the story, they stayed gone. The show didn't rush to restore balance or comfort the viewer. It allowed time to pass and consequences to linger. For young audiences, this was intense. The tone respected seriousness. Emotions weren't explained away. Silence mattered as much as action. That approach made Robotech groundbreaking and difficult to copy. Modern animation often prefers quick resolution. Robotech refused. Number 3. Silverhawks, 1986. Silverhawks looked futuristic and sleek. Metallic heroes, space patrols, bright visuals. But beneath the shine was a rigid moral system. Justice was absolute. Authority was centralized. Wrongdoing was met with permanent consequences. There was no flexibility, no room for error. The heroes weren't allowed doubt. They acted as extensions of the system. Individual judgment rarely mattered. That certainty felt empowering at the time. Today, it feels inflexible. Modern stories value nuance. Silverhawks rejected it. The show didn't explore alternatives. It presented order as the only solution. That simplicity doesn't translate well now. What once felt heroic now feels strict, and that shift in perspective is why the show faded. It wasn't wrong for its time. It just belonged to an era that preferred clear lines, and those lines no longer hold. Number 2. BraveStarr, 1987. BraveStarr tried to balance adventure with lessons. It mixed frontier imagery with futuristic ideas. It aimed to teach fairness, cooperation, and responsibility. But the execution froze it in its decade. The messaging was direct. The symbolism was obvious. The structure felt instructional. Modern audiences expect subtlety. BraveStarr spoke plainly. The show meant well. It wanted to guide. But guidance has changed. Today, stories ask questions. This one delivered answers. That difference makes it feel dated, not offensive, just rigid. It reflects a time when clarity mattered more than complexity, and that time has passed. BraveStarr remains sincere, and sincerity has value, but sincerity without flexibility struggles to endure. Number 1. C.O.P.S, 1988. C.O.P.S went all in on structure, teams, ranks, rules, everything had a place. The heroes were defined by function. Identity followed assignment. The system came first. The show celebrated order without questioning it. Decisions flowed one way. Authority was never challenged. At the time, this felt reassuring. A world where everything worked as intended. Today, it feels unrealistic. Modern storytelling values perspective. C.O.P.S valued compliance. That difference is why it wouldn't air today. Not because it was extreme, but because it left no room for discussion. It presented certainty as strength, and certainty no longer feels comforting. The 1980s didn't just make cartoons, they tested ideas. Some aged well, others didn't, and a few became too honest to revisit. These shows weren't accidents, they were experiments. So which one surprised you the most? Which memory came rushing back? Share your thoughts, pass this along, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories animation quietly left behind. Because sometimes what disappears says more than what survives.